It exploded like a surprise bomb. A new Vatican document, Mater Fidelis, has changed the official terminology regarding the Virgin Mary, unleashing a wave of shock and indignation throughout the Catholic world. Stay with us until the end. You'll understand why this seemingly technical text is dividing the faithful more than any other recent decision. It came like a bolt from the blue. The new Vatican document, entitled Mater Fidelis, was published without official fanfare, but its lines sent shockwaves through the Catholic world in just a few hours. No triumphal statement, no pastoral explanation, just a text that, with a cold and technical tone, intervenes on one of the most delicate questions of faith. The titles of the Blessed Virgin Mary and how her cooperation in the redemption should be understood and named. There is talk of a doctrinal clarification, but what many have perceived as a sign of a rupture. The document, approved by the reigning pontiff and signed by Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, effectively enters the heart of Mariology and redraws its linguistic boundaries. What is striking is not so much the publication itself, but the decision, presented as prudent and pastoral, to declare the use of the title of co-redemptrix for the Virgin Mary inappropriate. These words, once written down in an official document from the Holy See, immediately sparked a wave of indignant reactions among theologians, priests, and ordinary believers who spoke of a blow to tradition and an act that humiliates the Mother of God so as not to upset Protestants. For many Catholic observers, the problem is not only theological, but symbolic. The sense that the Church, for the umpteenth time, is choosing to cut short its deepest spiritual language, renouncing terms that for centuries have nourished popular piety and the doctrine of the saints. It is not, they say, a simple terminological update, but a real paradigm shift that calls into question the entire understanding of the Marian role in the history of salvation. The Mater Fidelis document presents itself in carefully studied, cautious, almost bureaucratic language, but behind this apparent lexical neutrality, one perceives a powerful doctrinal impact. The text, in fact, reiterates that some Marian titles, although rooted in Catholic devotion and supported by centuries of theology, should no longer be used officially. Among these, the most striking is the title of co-redemptrix, judged always inappropriate because, according to the reason given, it risks obscuring the uniqueness of Christ's saving mediation. These words, when read carefully, sound like an indirect condemnation of an entire theological school recognized by popes and saints. The same document admits that the expression was used by some pontiffs, but immediately adds that it was so without sufficient clarification. It is this phrase, more than any other, that has provoked indignation among the faithful most tied to tradition. An elegant way of saying that popes like Pius V, Pius XII, and St. John Paul II had used theologically confusing language, and that now ecclesial modernity must bring order. The reaction was immediate. On social media, and in the most discerning Catholic news networks, priests and lay people spoke of a humiliation of the Mother, a political act disguised as theology. Even some Vatican journalists, certainly not known for their polemical positions, have admitted that the publication of the document represents a blow to the hearts of many faithful. In fact, critics say this risk has always been clarified by Catholic theology. The co does not mean equal, but with, that is, subordinate participation, like co-pilot to pilot. Eliminating the title in the name of ambiguity, many argue, is tantamount to punishing popular faith for the confusion of those who refuse to understand. But Mater Fidelis doesn't just erase a word. It also introduces a new line of interpretation that effectively marginalizes centuries of Mariology. In the name of pastoral clarity, it is suggested that the use of other traditional expressions such as mediatrix of all graces be reduced and instead more universal and acceptable titles for dialogue with Protestants be encouraged. In other words, Marian theology is filtered through the lens of ecumenism. Whatever might disturb the separate interlocutors is set aside or rewritten. All this is made worse by its timing. Mater Fidelis arrives at a time of great ecclesial disorientation, where every word on tradition seems to become suspect, and every gesture that recalls ancient piety is treated as an obstacle to ecumenical dialogue. The first hours, following the publication of Mater Fidelis, saw a wave of reactions that transcended the confines of academic theology, touching the very heart of Catholic identity. An editorial in Catholic World Report called the document a piece of weak argument and accused the Holy See of displaying a double standard, wondering whether it was privileging ecumenical diplomacy over doctrinal clarity. The text, we read, reveals a certain distrust towards the faithful's ability to understand the faith, as if it were necessary to simplify everything so as not to offend other Christian worlds. In many traditional circles, there is talk of theological self-censorship and excessive caution towards other Christian confessions. According to several scholars, the suppression of the title of co-redemptrix did not arise from a dogmatic rethinking, but from the fear of creating tensions with Protestant communities, who interpreted Mary's role in the history of salvation differently. For many Catholics, however, this choice represents a renunciation of courageously explaining the truth. If a term is misunderstood, it is clarified, not erased, observed a professor of Mariology. On independent Catholic channels, the climate remains one of intense unease. Lay commentators and priests have spoken of a wound to Marian devotion and an impoverishment of the language of faith. The disappointment arises not only from a doctrinal position, but from the fear that the Church, in its attempt to be accepted by all, will end up no longer speaking with the voice that has always made it recognizable. As a Catholic journalist wrote, "It's not a question of ancient or modern words, it's a question of fidelity, and those who love Mary experience it as pain, not as a debate." The Mater Fidelis document bears the signature of Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, and the direct approval of the Pope. These two names alone explain the outcry that accompanied it. Fernandez, long considered the principal interpreter of the Pope's thought, is seen by many as the face of a more dialoguing theology, but also one more willing to scale back the language of tradition to avoid conflict. His influence is evident in his choice of deliberately soft language, yet capable of producing disruptive effects. For critics, Mater Fidelis represents the clearest image of the current pontificate, a church that doesn't openly deny its history, but cautiously rewrites it, eliminating anything that might be divisive. A pastoral ministry that prefers to avoid wounds rather than heal them. This is why, beyond its theological content, the document is read as a political and spiritual signal, the sign of a magisterium that speaks of Mary with respect, but with ever less devotion. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.